You can write it down. After May 16, these Bangladeshis better be prepared with their bags packed.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a direct quote. Narendra Modi, back in 2014 when he was running for prime minister.
And he said that where?
In West Bengal, a state with that really complex love-hate relationship with Bangladesh. Shared culture, shared history, all of that.
Right. But also aimed at Assam, I imagine.
Exactly. Address voters in Assam, too, where migration has been, well, a major issue for decades.
Okay.
So welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take the sources you give us, dig into them, and pull out the key insights. We try to cut through the noise,
Help you get really informed.
Precisely. And today we're unpacking a fascinating and I think really crucial set of materials. They get into the complex identity, the persistent marginalization of Bengali Muslims in India.
Yeah, it's a group navigating a really contentious space, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sort of caught between these big national narratives and just, harsh economic realities.
So our mission here, our goal for this deep dive, is to look at the history, the politics, the economics.
And understand how this marginalization gets, normalized. Justified, even.
Mm-hmm.
We want to explore some surprising facts, some nuanced perspectives that maybe challenge the common assumptions you hear.
And see how it all shapes the lives of millions.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's start with unpacking this Bengali Muslim identity. Because like you said, it's way more complex than it might seem.
Right.
You highlighted this popular assumption almost that Bengali identity in India is inherently Hindu. So the idea of a Bengali Muslim almost sounds like a contradiction, an oxymoron to some.
It does.
Yeah.
And that perception has deep, deep historical roots. Back in the colonial era, when it became obvious that, most people in East Bengal were Muslim, these different theories popped up to explain why.
Okay, like what?
Well, one theory, and you still hear echoes of this from the Hindu right today, using it to justify expulsion, was simply that Islam spread through Muslim settlement way back in the 13th century.
Right, settlement. What else?
Then you had British officials, some Hindu scholars, claiming, they were just low-caste Hindu converts.
Ah, the conversion theory.
Yeah, and then Muslim scholars countered, suggesting maybe they were Buddhist converts drawn in by Sufism.
Interesting. So competing religious conversion narratives.
And even travel writers.
Yeah.
Like Ibn Battuta claiming upper caste Hindus converted because of the supernatural powers of Muslim fakirs. It's quite a mix.
It really is. So what's the key takeaway from all these sort of competing origin stories?
I think the first really striking thing is just how political they all are. They're not just academic debates.
Right.
That narrative about low-caste Hindu converts, for instance, it's not just simplistic. It's strategically used. It helps maintain hierarchies, class, caste, nation, you name it.
So it ignores the actual reality.
Completely ignores the messy, fluid, heterogeneous reality of Bengali Muslim existence.
Yeah.
And this conversion idea, often treated as just fact, it has huge implications, especially when you connect it to the logic of partition.
Okay, let's make that connection. The partition logic, Hindus need India, Muslims need Pakistan, therefore Bengali Muslims belong in Bangladesh. How does that thinking actively shape their lives in India today?
Well, it creates this baseline assumption, this predisposition for them to be labeled, scapegoated as Bangladeshis within India. It inherently casts them as sort of inferior or out of place.
And that feeds into cultural invisibility, too.
Absolutely. And what's really surprising, maybe, is that even someone like Rabindranath Tagore, internationalist, opposed traditional Hindu practices. Even he contributed to this, perhaps unintentionally.
How so?
Well, remember his protest against the 1905 partition of Bengal? He used Raksha Bandhan.
The Hindu ritual, tying the thread.
Exactly. A powerful symbol, for sure, but one deeply rooted in Hindu tradition. It centered a Hindu cultural practice in a moment about Bengali unity.
Interesting nuance. And what about literature? You mentioned Mir Mushraf Hussain.
Yeah, he was one of the few Bengali Muslim writers really recognized in Hindu literary circles at the time. But think about his language. He used Shadu Bhasha, this very classical Sanskritized Bengali.
Even for Islamic concepts?
Yes, like using upabach or upashona for fasting, instead of the common terms roja or namaz.
Which are more rooted in Arabic or Persian.
Right, and using Shadu Bhasha like that kind of marginalized what people called Musalmani Bangla, the everyday colloquial Bengali spoken by many Muslims, which naturally included those Arabic and Persian words. That form of Bangla already had negative associations, so this sort of reinforced it.
So language itself becomes contested ground.
Definitely. But, it wasn't all negative. There were real moments of progress. By the early 1940s, Bengali Muslim writers were consciously creating their own body of literature, pushing back.
Like who?
Figures like Jasimuddin, his poem Kabar, became incredibly popular with everyone, Hindus and Muslims. Muhammad Shahidullah, recognized for his work on folklore, and Nazrul Islam.
Qazi Nazrul Islam.
He was hailed as the only true ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity because he treated Hindu and Muslim characters with such equality in his work. It shows there was this vibrant, evolving cultural identity happening.
An identity often erased in the bigger picture.
Precisely.
Okay, let's broaden out a bit. We know, generally speaking, that Muslims across India face significant challenges. I mean, government reports, Mandal, Sachar, Ranganath Mishra, they've all pointed to pretty dire situations.
Yeah, across the board, socioeconomic indicators, education, political representation, the data is pretty stark.
But you're saying Bengali Muslims face something unique, a kind of invisible marginalization.
I think so. Partly it's numbers. They're a smaller group overall. But it's also this double bind. In West Bengal, they can be excluded from Bengali nationalism because they're Muslim.
Right.
But then within broader Indian Muslim discourse, their Bengali identity is sometimes seen as, well, tainted or Hinduized, excluding them from a pan-Islamic identity too.
Wow. So, caught between worlds. If we think about marginalization, exclusion, discrimination, scapegoating, violence, all linked to identity, they're in a really tough spot.
A very precarious space. And this is where the whole India-Bangladesh relationship really comes into play heavily.
Okay, how does that dynamic work? India's role in the 1971 Liberation War.
Right. India intervened, framed it as a righteous act against genocide, which definitely boosted its international image.
Yeah.
But it also set up this slightly paternalistic relationship with Bangladesh.
Yeah.
An expectation of gratitude, of loyalty. And you pointed out something really crucial earlier, the, well, breathtaking hypocrisy of it all.
Yeah, demanding freedom for Bengalis in East Pakistan, while at the same time suppressing movements within India, Kashmir, Mizos, Nagas, even leftist Bengalis in West Bengal.
It wasn't just sympathy driving 1971. Yeah. There was also a real fear of revolutionary Bengali sentiment spilling over.
A complex mix of motives.
Definitely. And post-71, from Bangladesh's perspective, many bilateral agreements seem to heavily favor India. Think about the Rampal coal plant near the Sundarbans mangrove forest.
Huge environmental concerns there.
Massive. Or India's control over upstream rivers, leading to floods or droughts downstream in Bangladesh. It creates this constant undercurrent of tension.
And all this happens against the backdrop of Prime Minister Modi's Sabka Saath, together with all rhetoric.
Right. The official line is inclusion. But underneath, that drumbeat about the illegal Bangladeshi just keeps going.
We saw the Supreme Court in 2005 call large-scale migration a grave threat. Then Home Minister Chidambaram in 2009 said something similar.
And it all kind of culminated, didn't it? With the National Register of Citizens, the NRC, in Assam in 2018.
In the Citizenship Amendment Act, the CAA, in 2019.
Yeah, the CAA is key here. It offers citizenship to non-Muslim minorities from Bangladesh, Pakistan, Afghanistan, but specifically excludes Muslims.
Potentially rendering millions stateless.
Potentially, yes. Now, COVID-19 put the brakes on full implementation for a while, but the intent behind it seems pretty clear.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. That economic contradiction you flagged.
Yeah.
While the illegal Bangladeshi is painted as this huge economic burden, this threat,
Right.
Bangladesh is actually India's #1 source of tourists, more than the U.S.
I know, it's wild, isn't it? And half of India's medical tourism revenue comes from Bangladeshis. They're actively courted, especially in West Bengal, for shopping and medical care.
So how do we square that circle? Unwanted migrants, but sought-after tourists and patients.
This, I think, gets to the heart of it. It reveals this core contradiction, driven by neoliberal logic. You scapegoat the poor, low-income migrant,
The threat?
while you simultaneously formalize and encourage the movement of the middle-class Bangladeshi who brings in money. Medical visas, shopping visas, they're readily available. It's profitable.
So it's not an accident, it's a strategy.
It's a deliberate neoliberal formalization of cross-border movement for desired capital, while leaving the most vulnerable with basically no legal options. For low-income Bangladeshis, those illegal routes are often the only way to survive.
That's a powerful insight into how this neoliberal approach is reshaping things across South Asia. You mentioned it produces predatory growth, widens inequality, often reinforcing old ethnic hierarchies.
Exactly. And when the state does step in, it's usually to support business interests, cut public spending, consent for these policies, often manufactured through appeals to nationalism.
Right. And you see the influence of Western ideas, like through all the new TV channels, advertising certain lifestyles. A journalist noted how Indian newspapers in the 90s were constantly framing economic problems and then pushing privatization as the only answer.
Yeah, creating that pro-capitalist consensus, building acceptance for reforms.
Now, Bangladesh jumped on the market reform train pretty early, didn't it? After the military government took over in '75.
It did. Today, its economy heavily relies on two things: ready-made garments. RMG, they're the second biggest producer globally after China.
Incredible growth there.
Huge. And remittances, money sent back from migrant workers, mostly in the Middle East.
And you describe Bangladesh as having a retreating state.
In many ways, yeah. NGOs often step in to provide basic welfare services that the government might otherwise handle. And look at the export processing zones, the EPZs.
What happens there?
Well, they offer big tax breaks to companies, and crucially, they often bypass national labor laws. You even have intelligence agencies, like the DGIF, reportedly monitoring garment workers to keep them, well, docile.
So the workers driving the economy are treated how?
That's the paradox. They're national heroes on paper, boosting GDP, but the moment they demand better wages or conditions, they can be instantly recast as, expendable, vectors of disease, even criminals.
And patriarchy plays a role in pushing men to migrate for work abroad.
Absolutely. It contributes to this vast pool of overseas labor sending money back home.
Now, India's reforms really kicked off in the 90s, embraced pretty enthusiastically by policymakers.
Very enthusiastically. And Modi's slogan, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, together with all, development for all sounds inclusive, but in practice, it often meant cutting corporate taxes, lowering interest rates, pushing privatization.
And the land grabs you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, a major feature. Perfectly good paddy fields suddenly declared dry and infertile on paper so they could be legally handed over to developers for special economic zones.
Sparking massive farmer protests.
Understandably. And while India has labor laws, the reality for the massive informal workforce is precarious few benefits, little protection. Though, interestingly, unlike Bangladesh, India's public universities and hospitals have generally remained relatively strong, even if facing other pressures.
And the BJP, under Modi, did something quite clever, didn't they? Linking neoliberalism with Hindu nationalism.
Very skillfully. They essentially argued that development is part of Hindu identity, sometimes using, frankly, absurd claims like Lord Ganesha's elephant head, proving ancient India had plastic surgery.
Right, linking modern progress to this imagined, glorious Hindu past.
Exactly. And even Make in India sounds protectionist, right?
Yeah.
But it was really about opening the economy even more to global investment, just under a nationalist banner.
Amidst all this, you highlighted a powerful quote from a Bengali Muslim construction worker, Muhammad Rafiq.
Yes. He said, "I go, work, keep my head down, and come back. They don't like us Muslims. I cannot imagine living there and taking my wife and children there. We might be poor, but we have dignity."
That really cuts deep. It speaks volumes about the impact of Hindutva violence and general Islamophobia. It deters permanent settlement.
It absolutely does. So a lot of the migration that does happen is temporary for low-paid contract work, often linked to that Gujarat model where labor rights are deliberately weakened to attract companies.
Which brings us to the informal economy. It's not just some leftover sector anymore, is it?
Not at all. It absorbs huge numbers of people who are just marginally employed.
Yeah.
And it has its own kind of formalities, verbal contracts, complex networks.
Alongside the Dui Nambori, the shady stuff, subcontracting, smuggling.
Right. But the key insight here is that capitalism, in a way, produces this informalization. It needs that flexible, unregulated labor pool. It serves the system.
Okay, let's talk about the border itself, the actual physical border. India built a fence along much of the Bangladesh border, especially in West Bengal.
Yes, and uniquely, it's set back 150 yards inside Indian territory. Creates this awkward buffer zone.
Governments love talking about fortified borders, especially with Pakistan, citing military threats. But with Bangladesh, there's no military parity. Yet the security language persists. Why?
Well, what's fascinating is this idea of strong borders versus weak borderlands. The official border, the line on the map, is strong militarized controlled points for formal trade.
Right.
But the borderlands, the areas around the border, are often portrayed as weak, chaotic, dangerous, full of informal trade, undocumented migration, security threats.
Which allows politicians to spit narratives.
Exactly. Manipulate information using national security as the justification. And let's be clear, the militarization isn't just about external threats. It's very much about controlling the people living in those border areas.
Especially if they have ethnic ties across the line.
Precisely. It makes Bengali Muslim identity itself inherently suspect in that context.
What about the Border Security Force, the BSF? Their own perspectives?
Well, back in 2018, some inspector generals talked about protecting the border populations being important, but also admitted having counterinsurgency roles.
Which raises questions, given the history. Like the Fulani Khatun killing, that image went viral. It really highlighted the brutality that can happen. Seemed like a clear call for a different approach.
It did. A need for a paradigm shift. Away from seeing the border purely through a hostile lens, yet those same IGs still listed transborder crimes, illegal migration, smuggling as their main focus.
So the core perspective hasn't really changed.
It seems deeply ingrained. One IG admitted infiltration wasn't zero, but claimed it was down because India relaxed medical visa rules.
But as we discussed, those relaxed visas don't help the poor people crossing out of necessity.
Exactly. It's a selective easing, benefiting some, while the underlying issues for the most vulnerable remain.
For the people living right there, though, it's often just life. We call it smuggling. They call it trade.
That captures it perfectly.
Yeah.
In places like Paudinga, in West Bengal, you found villagers facing just crippling unemployment. Their survival depends on this petty trading, this informal cross-border exchange.
And they're angry about it. You quoted them saying, "Go tell Didi Mapa Banerjee we cross the border every day because there is nothing else to do here."
Yeah, real frustration. And they also describe this shift.
Yeah.
How informal goods that used to move, discreetly now apparently move more officially.
How?
Through trucks, supposedly with the BSF's seal of approval, all controlled by powerful syndicates.
Syndicates involving who?
According to the villagers, people with connections, BSF, customs officials, police, big cattle suppliers, their point was clear. It's only criminal, illegal, if you are poor.
Wow. So the system benefits the powerful, criminalizes the desperate.
Seems that way. But alongside that, you also found this incredible sense of solidarity among the villagers.
Yeah, despite knowing it was illegal, they talked about this openness, this common sense that open borders and free movement just felt natural.
They'd openly tell the researcher, "Oh yeah, I'm Bangladeshi," and laugh about it. Because the community protected each other. They were all in it together, surviving together.
That's a really striking counter-narrative to the official security discourse.
It is. But there's a darker side too, that illegality creates immense vulnerability, sometimes coercion. Marriage, for example, is crucial for these cross-border networks, but sometimes it blurred into trafficking, all justified as necessary for sustaining entire villages.
And even formal trade gets bogged down.
Yeah, the official checkposts create huge bottlenecks. Truck drivers saw it as just the BSF flexing their muscles, highlighting how inefficient the formal system can be compared to the informal flows.
The enclave swap in 2015, that's another really telling moment. These pockets of Indian land in Bangladesh and Bangladeshi land in India.
Yeah, for decades they were just forgotten territories, stateless zones almost. When the swap finally happened, people celebrated like it was Independence Day.
But the residents had a choice, right? Stay or move to their home country. What did most choose?
This is crucial. Most people in the former Indian enclaves, like a woman named Fatima, chose to stay in Bangladesh.
Why?
Their reasoning was stark. A complete lack of support from the Indian government over decades. No schools, no clinics, just harassment from authorities. Fatima's words were blunt. The Indian government has no doyamaya, no care or mercy.
So their lived experience told them staying put, even changing nationality, was better.
Exactly. It confirmed how hard governing those enclaves was, but also underscored what seemed like India's historical anxiety, this fear of losing land and gaining Bengali Muslims.
And again, informal networks were key for survival.
Absolutely. Villagers used their local knowledge to protect each other, often knowing who was who better than the authorities did.
You mentioned some visual metaphors that capture these contradictions too, like signposts.
Right. On the Indian side, a sign might say caution in English.
Right.
Simple enough. But the Bangla version underneath reads Shabtan Shamne Bangladesh.
Which translates more like
Beware, Bangladesh ahead.
Hmm.
It's much more ominous, vaguer, directed at locals. It implies danger, not just caution.
And on the Bangladeshi side?
You might see a government poster advertising jobs, hiring maids in the Middle East through government bidding.
Legitimizing economic migration.
Exactly, legitimizing it as a state-sanctioned path to opportunity. So those two images side by side really show the clash. India's security focus conflating Bangladeshi with threat versus Bangladesh's neoliberal embrace of labor mobility.
Okay, let's dive deeper into Assam now, because the NRC and CAA really played out there first, almost like a pest case.
Very much so. The BJP pushed the NRC, finishing it in 2018, ostensibly to identify citizens versus non-citizens. And many Assamese activists, the Kalanjia, supported it. They saw it as tackling the illegal Bangladeshi threat they'd worried about for years.
But their goal wasn't quite the same as the BJP's.
Not exactly. The Assamese activists, based on the 1971 Assam Accord, wanted everyone who entered after that date deported, regardless of religion. Hindus, Muslims, didn't matter.
Whereas the BJP...
The BJP's agenda, particularly with the CAA, was clearly about making space for Bangladeshi Hindus, fitting their Hindu Rashtra vision. This created tension.
And the new chief minister after 2021, Hemanta Biswa Sarma, didn't exactly bridge that gap.
No, he doubled down, declaring no Hindu is a foreigner in India. That alienated Assamese groups who opposed the CAA precisely because it differentiated based on religion, undermining the 71 Accord.
Of course, Assam has this terribly scarred history of violence against Bengali Muslims long before the NRC-CAA.
Horrifically so. The Nellie Massacre in 1983, estimates range from 3,000 to 5,000 people killed in a single day. And recurring waves of Bodo Muslim violence in 93, 2008, 2012.
And the narrative often blamed illegal Bangladeshis.
Consistently. But official investigations frequently found the victims were Indian citizens, and that the violence looked much more like deliberate ethnic cleansing. The label was used to justify the violence after the fact.
Colonial legacies are still casting long shadows there too, aren't they? Like the inner line.
Yeah, the Bengal Eastern Frontier Regulations of 1873. It created this arbitrary line separating hills people from plains people, restricting movement, a classic divide and rule tactic.
And that logic still echoes today.
It does, but sometimes in contradictory ways. Take the 6th schedule of the Constitution. It allows for autonomous administrative divisions. But look at the Bodoland Territorial Area District, the BTA. It's in the plains, which cuts right against that original Hills-Plains separation logic.
Land disputes are another constant flashpoint.
Huge. You have regulations allowing tribal belts and blocks. But then, historically, the Congress government encouraged landless peasants from East Bengal, mostly Muslims, to settle on forest land. Then conflicts arise over farming rights, subcontracting to non-tribals. It's incredibly complex.
And hovering over all of this is AFSPA.
The Armed Forces Special Powers Act. Assam is still under it. It normalizes a heavy military presence, ostensibly for national security, but many argue it just fuels conflict and alienates the local population further.
It really layers complexity onto what looks like just a border issue from afar.
Absolutely. Even the Assam movement itself, back in 79 to 85.
Triggered by worries about illegal voters on the rolls.
Yes. But the crucial shift during that movement was the meaning of foreigner. It changed from meaning someone from outside Assam to meaning someone from outside India, a much broader, more nationalistic targeting.
And that movement gave rise to the AGP party.
The Assam Ghana Parishad, yeah. They rode that wave of anti-immigrant sentiment, while also, perhaps more quietly, ensuring the economic interests of existing landlords were protected. And tragically, that period led directly to the Nellie Massacre.
How does neoliberalism look specifically in Assam's economy?
Well, there hasn't been much industrial growth. Agriculture is still huge, employing most people. But paradoxically, the service sector is what's actually driving economic growth overall.
And you see that tension in places like Lower Assam.
Definitely. You have Bengali Muslim peasants, often labeled immigrants regardless of citizenship, who've actually made those difficult, flood-prone riverine areas highly productive, especially with commercial paddy farming.
But then you go to Guwahati.
Right, the state capital. It's aspiring to be this modern neoliberal city, shopping malls, global brands, but it's also a major hotspot of economic activity that attracts those very same low-skilled Bengali Muslim peasants from the rural areas.
Who are then promptly called Bangladeshi once they arrive in the city.
Exactly. It's the heart of the anti-immigrant movement and the place pulling in the labor that gets labeled as immigrant. A total paradox.
And then there's the whole Salafé phenomenon. This is really wild.
It is. So ULFA, the United Liberation Front of Assam, was fighting for independence. Salafame means surrendered ULFA.
Oh, okay.
In the late 90s, the government essentially started bribing ULFA members to surrender. They got grants, business licenses, often in exchange for informing on their former comrades.
Creating new capitalists out of former insurgents.
Precisely. They call it ceasefire capitalism. But it also had a very dark side, a period of secret killings where these Selfa cadres allegedly formed death squads, targeting remaining ULFA members and sympathizers.
And now these Selfa figures are major economic players.
Known for mafia-like behavior, apparently.
Oh.
They own malls, cinemas, dominate lucrative sectors like coal, sand, mining, real estate. As one student put it, these guys might have been peasants a generation ago. Now they're contractors making serious money.
A direct line from conflict to capital accumulation.
A stark one. And adding another layer are these big connectivity projects being discussed. China's Belt and Road, the BCIM corridor linking Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar.
Seen as an Asian alternative to Western-led globalization.
Sort of. Lots of talk about new infrastructure, industrial zones, which could, of course, reshape the region's economy and power dynamics yet again.
Okay, let's shift focus finally to West Bengal. What do the sources tell us about the socioeconomic conditions of Bengali Muslims there?
Well, one survey of businesses showed really severe underrepresentation of Muslims in skilled jobs.
Which points back to
the importance of English and Hindi for getting ahead. If you don't have those languages, access to better jobs is limited. Historically, after partition, the urban middle class in West Bengal became overwhelmingly upper caste Hindu, the Muslim middle class largely dispersed.
And most Bengali Muslims in West Bengal live rurally.
A huge majority, 82%, concentrated in districts like Murshidabad, Malda, often far from media glare, political tension, and importantly, they're rarely the actual beneficiaries of so-called Muslim appeasement policies.
Education is a challenge, too.
Big challenge. Often it's simply a lack of accessible schools in these rural areas, not a lack of desire for education.
And neoliberalism in rural West Bengal hasn't meant development, but something else.
Often, yes. Not just neglect, but active dispossession. Remember the CPIM government's big industrialization push around 2006?
Mandy Graham Singer, huge protests.
Exactly, because it involved forcibly taking peasant land for private companies. Those protests eventually led to a new Land Acquisition Act in 2013, but even that, despite having safeguards, still facilitated dispossession in many cases.
And what's the outcome for those who lose land?
The reality is grim. Maybe 90% of these newly landless people can't find stable, year-round work. They often just remain agricultural laborers, now without their own land, development creating deeper precarity.
What about Kolkata, the city? It's seen as an aspirational neoliberal hub.
It is. Lots of infrastructure flyovers, the metro expansion attracting corporate investment. But the pattern of development has been interesting, less like classic Western gentrification, pushing people out of the core.
More of a bypass model?
Yeah, focusing development on the outskirts, areas like Newtown, as displaced renters who couldn't afford the new areas, but it did enrich some existing homeowners whose property values shot up.
And then there's the Bajraluk ethic. Can you unpack that?
It's this cultural ideal among the upwardly mobile Bengali middle and upper classes, an aspiration towards a life that's laid back, intellectual, cerebral, kind of anti-materialistic, even romanticizing Kolkata's famous decay.
Seen as classy.
Right, seen as classy, sophisticated, especially when contrasted with, say, the perceived crass commercialism of the Marwari business community.
But this laid-back ideal has a downside. It feeds stereotypes.
It absolutely can. Other communities, Marwaris, Punjabis, Biharis, sometimes point to this Bajraluk ethic and see Bengalis as lazy, lacking ambition, and they might prefer hiring their own, often Hindi speakers.
So an attitude associated with upper caste Hindus gets used to reinforce those old colonial stereotypes about all Bengalis being weak or unproductive.
Exactly. It's a fascinating, perhaps unintended consequence of that cultural ideal.
Language is key here, too. Kolkata as the cultural capital of Bangla.
It's definitely seen that way. Even though Bangla is also a state language elsewhere in India and the national language of Bangladesh.
But there's a tension within West Bengal itself.
A big one. Kolkata might take pride in its Bangla, but the language constantly contends with the dominance of English and Hindi within India. In Bangladesh, the main pressure on Bangla comes primarily from English.
And in Bangladesh, there's that whole debate about correct Bangla.
Oh yeah, the Bikrito Bangla, corrupted colloquial, versus Shuddho Bangla, pure correct debate, especially on TV and radio. It's quite fierce sometimes.
And now there's a new trend.
Apparently, yes. This cool Ghazi Borzi Bangla, basically everyday spoken Bangla, but delivered with a deliberately adopted sort of generic American or British accent.
Why? For cultural capital.
Seems like it. Being able to speak English well, or even just sound like you speak English well while speaking Bangla, signals a certain class position, a connection to global capitalism.
Which inevitably devalues regional dialects and accents.
And reinforces those social hierarchies. It's a subtle but really powerful way language operates.
Okay, so we've covered a huge amount of ground. History, politics, economics, borders, identity. What's the big picture here? What does it all mean?
I think what emerges is just how complexly the identity and the very existence of Bengali Muslims in India are shaped. You have these intersecting forces constantly at play. Those historical narratives we started with, the actions of the post-colonial state, the pervasive effects of neoliberal economics, and that really tricky, often tense India-Bangladesh relationship.
And we kept coming back to that split image of the Bangladeshi, didn't we?
We did. From the unwanted, poor migrant depicted as a threat, to the welcomed, affluent tourist or patient bringing in money. That contradiction just lays bare the deep biases and, frankly, the economic calculations involved.
So this marginalization isn't just some accidental oversight.
No, the sources suggest it's more like a byproduct, a result of development models that prioritize urban centers and certain kinds of capital, and what you could call a biopolitics.
Meaning how the state manages populations.
Yeah, how it implicitly or explicitly values some lives, some bodies, over others based on their perceived economic worth or political alignment. Some groups become essential, others expendable.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over.
Consider this. What are the hidden costs, social, human, political, mother, when a nation builds its sense of development, its very identity, partly on the strategic othering of a whole segment of its own people?
And perhaps closer to home, how might the language we use every day, the casual terms, the assumptions embedded in our conversations, how might they, even completely unintentionally, end up reinforcing those very divisions?
Something to think about as you encounter news and discussions about these regions, definitely.